Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us again on another True Purpose podcast. My name is Jeremy Graham, and I'm the president and founder of True Purpose Ministries. We have two of our counselors on with us today, Mr. Stephen Dees and Mr. Willie Leonard. I call him Willis.
Come on,
but either one, yeah, Willie Leonard. Today, I wanted to talk with the people out there. I want to talk about marijuana today. A lot of people call it weed. We have all kinds of different names. However, it is one of those things that, in my opinion, there's a lot of myths surrounding it. In my opinion, there's a lot of lies surrounding it. Well, I want to talk about whether or not we feel like it's a gateway drug, and really what I would also like to do is prepare and educate the families out there. I know that when I was growing up, probably most of us smoked weed. I smoked a lot growing up and didn't really think that it was that bad. But one thing that we have come to understand with the marijuana that is on the scene today is back when I was smoking it back in 96 to 98, or actually all the way up until 98, I believe the TH levels were around 5 to 8%. In the marijuana that we had back then. Now they are boasting 75% to 100% THC. It is a totally different ball game. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the weed that's out there today, and how the kids are really getting on it. I've also got a very special guest in a couple podcasts that will tell you a story about how he overdosed and how he died. And how he was, of course, Narcaned back from just smoking weed. And so, of course, that's going to be in a couple podcasts. But again, Stephen, if you don't mind, as you have counseled a lot of your counselees, talk a little bit on why you feel like that marijuana is a gateway to all of the harder drugs.
I would say that right up there with alcohol, that marijuana is probably the number one drug that these guys experiment with when they're younger.
Yeah, that's the way it was for me, I know personally, is that I started off with alcohol, and then weed was one of those things that just everybody could get, and it wasn't that big of a deal. But I quickly found that weed just wasn't doing it for me anymore. And I was one of those guys that said, I'll never smoke weed or I'll never do drugs. All I'm going to do is drink. But then I found myself smoking weed. And then when I was smoking weed, I said, well, I'll never do cocaine or I'll never do pills.
Right.
And then what happened? I found myself doing that too.
Right.
So
it's the gateway drug. It opens up the mind to other things, and
yeah,
and that's not good enough. So we go to something else more stronger.
That's right.
And a lot of these kids, they end up going from marijuana to maybe popping a pill, and they don't realize at 28 years old they're under the bridge looking for heroin.
Yeah.
And they're the fentanyl that's out there now. People are dying left and right.
That's right. Yeah, Willie, why don't you talk a little bit about what you see?
What I was going to say was what I see, and in my own experience in my life is with marijuana is like when guys, it is a gateway drug. I know in high school, when I started smoking weed in high school, and that led to other things. But even in recovery, I see guys they come into recovery, they get clean, they're doing good, they've quit doing the heroin and the fentanyl and all that stuff, and then they say, well, it's just marijuana. It's just a little bit of weed, you know. And so they go out and they start smoking a little weed or doing some dab pens or whatever it is they do nowadays. And then the next thing you know, they're drinking, and then eventually that gets to where that's not what their soul wants. That's not what they crave, because it's not their drug of choice.
Yeah.
And they end up going back out, and the next thing you know, they're on heroin or meth, or and they've relapsed, and they're in a real bad spot real quickly just from smoking a little weed.
One of our guests that we had on a podcast, her name is Jan McCoy, and I talked in that podcast that she does a seminar called Hijacked, and it's basically talking about what drugs and alcohol does to the brain. And the last one, there was a guy there named Ben Court. He has a book named called Weed Incorporated, and what he does is he specializes in just exposing that whole industry. And he proved, and he talked in that seminar, that the same people that are really behind the marijuana push and legalizing the marijuana are the same people that can be traced all the way back to the OxyContin, pharmacists, the big pharma deal, that it's all about the money, and that is why there's a big, massive push for legalization. And what's happening during that legalization is that they're telling the legislators the wrong stuff and they're telling them the wrong information, and they're getting the laws passed. But all they need is just a little foothold into the law, and once they get into that foothold, then of course it just expands into everything else. And so I want to go over some statistics that he brought in that was really good, because again, we're talking about the weed, and again, what I want to do is I want to talk to the parents, because I know that if you were a parent and you smoked weed back in the day, you said, you know what, if my kid smokes a little weed, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
It's not the same weed. It's not the same weed. All right. It is literally 75% to 100%. We have vaping pens that now have it, CBD gummies. We have some stuff that's kind of like crack, that's like rock, that they could smoke as well. And literally, we have had understanding of kids smoking that stuff, and when they did, they went into like a psychosis state where they didn't know where they were freaking out and everything else. And that's happened in schools today, and it's all been done through vape pens. But this is a latest statistic. Daily use of marijuana sees a 5-time increase in psychosis. If you just do it on the weekends, you see a 3-time increase in psychosis, and 24% of all psychosis cases in the study group was caused by weed alone. It is 1.4 times more likely to be depressed, to bring depression. You can have acute anxiety. It also does anxiety disorders. Bipolar is worsened outcomes for bipolar. And also, listen to this, you are 2 times more likely to attempt suicide requiring hospitalization of people who smoke weed. Now, again, we see the vapes, we see the edibles, and we see the concentrates, and just that understanding of what the weed is like today, it's a totally different ball game.
Yeah.
And the kids that we're seeing into our program now have experienced a lot of that. And I tell you, it is just amazing to see what the weed is doing to the individuals today.
Yeah, I can attest to that, Jeremy, from just my own my own experience. Because like I was telling you guys before we started, you know, I smoked a lot of weed back in high school and everything, and was fine. And then as I got older, and I got some clean time. I got off the harder drugs, and then I had a relapse, and I was like, I'll just smoke some weed. And then, but the weed now, instead of back in the '90s, with the weed now, it's just it's not the same stuff.
No.
It sent me into paranoia, like I would say almost like a schizophrenic type of deal.
Yeah.
And I've seen young men come into this program, just here recently, they've come in and they're like, all I do is smoking weed, and they're out of their minds. And it's because of the marijuana, the weed today. It's just pure THC with like I keep thinking about the dab pens and the stuff, and I hear I got some younger daughters, and they talking about that stuff, and then like people are going to the hospital. Younger kids, my daughter's friends are going to the hospital over just smoking marijuana or THC.
And think about this: when they go into that psychosis from using marijuana, what's the natural thing that's going to happen? They're going to go to a hospital, and they're going to be seen by a doctor or a psychiatrist, and what are they going to do? They're probably going to put them on more mental health meds, and that's understandable, but it's all started from marijuana. And so, again, marijuana needs to be, of course, we really need to understand what marijuana is today, and you really need to be wise to it, parents. And if you are a person out there that is using marijuana, please get help. It's not the same marijuana, like we've said. Please get help. You can come in to a program and get help for your marijuana use, because you need to be able to be rehabilitated from that.
One of the things you spoke about, that when people come in, we do an ASI on many of them, and in that ASI is one of the mental evaluations. And you can find somebody who's been smoking weed, they'll have anxiety and depression, they'll have suicidal thoughts, and you let them be clean for 30 to 60 days and do the ASI again, and they don't have those symptoms. That tells me that these doctors are using the same ASIs and that we're using, and they're really diagnosing them with a drug disorder or a substance abuse disorder, but labeling it with a mental, then giving them mental meds, and then we have another whole ball game right there. You're right.
Yeah, I've seen that. many times with guys that come in the program. You know, they come in and they have all these diagnoses. You know, even the guys that just come into smoking weed, they have all these diagnoses: depression, anxiety, bipolar, this, that, or the other. And then by the time, you know, they're here 30, 60 days, and the next thing you know, they're clear headed and they've got all the drugs out of their system, and all that stuff goes away. So, and the only variable that's changed in their life is that they quit doing drugs. You know, and
and that's including the marijuana.
That's including the marijuana. Yeah.
And you know, one thing about marijuana too is a lot of people say, "Well, there's no big deal about marijuana," but you know, I don't know if y'all remember when you smoked weed. I didn't really want to do anything. I mean, I didn't want to go out to my job. All we want to do is eat. Eat and sleep. But I mean, that's what it is.
Spoonology.
Now I know. Again, we talked about the weed habit being a lot different. But I mean, again, if it's putting you in that psychosis state, what kind of job are you going to be able to hold down? What kind of relationships are you going to be able to keep doing that kind of stuff? So again, it's one of those things that you know, it's a whole lot more detrimental. I want to talk about a Bible verse though as we're closing up. People has asked me, they said, okay, what are you going to do, Jeremy, when weed becomes legal? And that's one of those things that is probably coming down the pike. It's already happened in a lot of states. You know, we know California, I think Michigan, Colorado, and there might be a few more, New York maybe. But they said, you know, what are you going to do when marijuana is legal? And I said, really nothing. We're going to keep the same stance on it, because again, if you look at alcohol, it's legal, but alcohol destroys lives. There's being being people killed every day from either drunk drivers or you know, alcohol poisoning or cirrhosis of the liver. I mean, that's still an addiction, and it's still bad, and we are going to take the same stance no matter if it's legal or not.
Come on, somebody.
Amen. And now the verse that I'd like to talk about is what Paul says. I think I know it's in 1 Corinthians, but I can't remember the chapter, but I think it may be 6. But he says this. He says, all things are lawful, but not all things are necessary. All things are lawful, but I will not be brought under the power of any. Okay, so we as sons and daughters of God, there are lawful things that we could do. I could literally leave here, get in my car, go to the liquor store and buy a 6-pack. Okay, but is it necessary, Paul is saying? Is it necessary that I have to have that 6-pack? Do I have to have that 6-pack to live? And the same thing, weed, when it gets legal, I could go down here to probably a weed shop and get some weed and go smoke it, and guess what? It's legal. If I get pulled over, I'm okay. But is it necessary? But what I love about that next part of the scripture, Paul says, he says, all things are lawful, not all things are necessary. But he says, I will not be brought under the power of any. And that's the nature of drugs and alcohol. No matter if it's weed, no matter if it's Oxycontin, no matter if it's heroin, fentanyl, or alcohol, the nature of it is to bring you under its power. Yes. And you can't tell me that when you smoke weed that you are not brought under a power of something. 100%. You're not thinking rationally. You're not making right choices and right decisions. And we have to be totally honest with ourselves. We are not in the right frame of mind. And so with somebody who wants to legalize marijuana and doesn't see anything wrong with marijuana, there's all kinds of arguments. We might get into those arguments a little bit later. But again, we've got to understand that it is detrimental, and it's a detrimental to our society. So guys, once again, thank you for coming on. We're probably going to do a part 2 of marijuana here pretty soon. But we just want to thank everybody for joining us today. And again, be looking for the next few podcasts coming out. But please like and share this video, but also the subscribe button on the bottom. Please subscribe so that you'll get all the notifications of the newest videos coming out. But until then, if you are looking for help, please go to our website at truepurposeministries.com. You'll be able to go on there and see how you can apply to get into the program. We'd love to be able to help you. And you have a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Come on, somebody.